Okay, everyone, we are probably going to have some folks that continue to trickle in, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Catherine Tuttle, and I'm the Alumni Career Services Coordinator here in the Alumni Association, and I am so excited to have you with us. This is our 6th webinar in our Alumni Career Webinar Series, and if you've been listening or attending to any of these sessions, you know that we've spent quite a bit of time talking about personal branding. And when I say personal branding, I mean making sure that you have an understanding of your unique value proposition and then are able to communicate that consistently to your target audience, whether that is a prospective employer or within your current organization or just to your general network. So understanding what makes you unique and what your unique skill set is important, but once you understand that, what do you do with it? How do you go about making yourself stand out? And this idea of making yourself unforgettable is one that I talk to alumni about quite a bit. So I am thrilled to have Gary with us today to provide a fresh perspective on this topic. Gary Greene is a 1990 graduate from NC State, and his company, Greene Resources, helps companies across the country locate and hire talent. Gary himself has an incredible ability to build and maintain relationships with business colleagues and partners, and that skill, which I have witnessed firsthand since we've gotten to know each other over the past year, has really been instrumental in both his personal and professional life. He is a dynamic speaker, he's a dedicated alum, and he is a friend to me and the Alumni Association. So I'm going to hand it over to him shortly so that he can share his expertise with us. Couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We're going to take questions throughout, so if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. There's a hand icon right above the participants window. You can raise your hand and we can give you the microphone and you can ask your question live, or you can feel free to chat it into this chat box at the bottom left of your screen, and I will read it aloud to the group. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gary and we'll get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine, for that introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. What a pleasure it is to have this opportunity to talk with you about creating that standout experience and becoming unforgettable. Now, before I get into the meat of the program, first I have to tell you there's going to be some examples through this. In preparing for the talk today, those that signed up did a little bit of research, and so you may see a name or two come up on the screen, and it's just to help emphasize the point of how to customize our interactions with others. I do want to start, though, and talk to you about something a little bit different and take a few minutes to talk to you about cornbread. That's right, cornbread. Just the other week, I read an article written by a journalist, Lauren McKay, who typically writes about social media. Lauren also happens to absolutely adore cornbread. She was in the habit of communicating with another traveling journalist through Twitter, and after seeing the other journalist's tweet about enjoying cornbread, Ms. McKay tweeted this response from her hotel room at the Gaylord National Resort. I would kill for some cornbread right now, but something tells me that's not Gaylord National's specialty. Forgetting that her tweet was public, she was surprised to find a reply from the Gaylord Hotel that she could find cornbread at the sports bar, and they offered to wrap some up for her since she was supposed to be leaving for the airport shortly. But that's not the part of the story that got me. 4 months later, she's attending another conference, this time at the Gaylord Opryland Resort. A few minutes after checking into her room, she receives a knock on the door. She opens it to find a server with a tray of, you guessed it, cornbread, and a handwritten note from the hotel. Just in case you still have a craving for cornbread, we hope you enjoy your stay. You see, one of Gaylord Hotel's 6 service basics on which everyone is trained is to discover and delight the guest. If employees can secretly discover something about their guests, then delight them with that personalized something, so that their stay becomes more memorable or memorably wonderful, they're encouraged and empowered to do so. More memorably wonderful. In other words, unforgettable. Whether you are searching for your next job, working towards your first promotion, trying to land that next account, for this period of time we have over the phone, I want each of us to find ways we can start delivering cornbread. At Greene Resources, we are a recruiting solutions company helping our customers locate, land, and develop the talent critical to the success of their organizations. We just celebrated our 13-year anniversary and have had a number of local and national recognitions over the years. I know that our success has everything to do with cornbread. In other words, with the Greene team employees both taking time to discover and delight and striving to make their interactions with others memorably wonderful and unforgettable. I took the time to review the attendee list today and research some of the things that each of you do. And I have to admit, today I feel like I'm a little bit preaching to the choir. I have had tremendous admiration for what you do, and the mere fact that you're taking the time to be on the call today, regardless of the speaker, separates you from the rest. You'll see a couple of names up on your screen. You're people like Catherine Tuttle. Many of you know Catherine, a 2003 NCSU graduate and the Alumni Career Services Coordinator for the North Carolina State Alumni Association. There are many things that are special about Catherine, but I want to point out one important one. Catherine is passionate about her work. So much so, in March, just this past March, her peers nominated her for the University Advancement Award for Excellence, and she won. Catherine, that passion for the PAC and the work that you do every day make you unforgettable. And you're people like Jay Dawkins. I don't know if Jay's gotten on the call yet, but he's a civil designer for Stantec who served as NCSU student body president from 2008 to 2009. Those that know Jay say he has the remarkable ability to achieve large goals, think long term, and communicate with a variety of audiences. Most importantly, Jay never complains about the work at hand and gladly takes on any challenges. Jay, I've never met you, but I know that it is qualities such as these that make you unforgettable. And you're people like Adam Compton, Assistant Director of Development at NCSU and a 2009 graduate. Now I could talk about all of the accolades Adam has received and did receive while a student at NCSU, but instead I want to talk about barbecue sauce. In 2007, Adam and his roommate created their own barbecue sauce, ACW barbecue sauce, that combines both Eastern and Western North Carolina sauce to form what they call a true blend of North Carolina. They even decided to video their first bottle coming off the line back in 2007 and place it on their website, www.acwsauce.com. Adam, following your dream and creating the perfect solution to North Carolina's barbecue debate makes you unforgettable. Everyone on the call today has a story to tell. For you see, every day we have those defining moments, those moments that define success or failure, yes or no, winning or losing, making a difference, or simply passing through. And when it comes to becoming, being successful and becoming unforgettable, there are four things I would like to discuss. First, the battleground is on the customer experience. It's not about you. It's about being engaged, being there, being present in the moment, and generating the standout experience. I want to start with the battleground being on the customer experience, because each of you are creating experiences every day. How do we create those defining moments within those experiences? What we have to do is recognize that the experience with us is being compared to any experience the customer, coworker, or boss had, not just the experiences with your competitor. If somebody else satisfies their customers better than you do, no matter what type of business, you suffer by comparison. So how do we win this battle? Well, let's look at it from the customer's point of view for a minute. There was a survey that was completed. A study was done And the question was, what is the biggest effect on a customer's reason to buy, a customer's decision-making process? They then redid the study 10 years later and got the same results. Now the top 5 things are up here on the screen: selection, quality, price, confidence, and service. But what was really interesting with this is in what order these came in. So 5th on the list was price. Price is most important to about 15% of the population, but most of the time, price is not what's most important. 4th on the list was selection. 3rd was service. Service is anything the customer wants it to be. 2nd on the list was quality. Please remember that quality is not what you put into something, but what the customer gets out of it. So if you're talking about quality, you want to talk about it from the customer's point of view. But number 1 on the study, number 1 on the list, when it was redone 10 years later, number 1 on the list again, was confidence. So how do we build confidence? Well, we have to build that type of relationship in which we're making a difference. So how do we do that? I'd like for each of you to think for a minute about who has made a difference in your life. A name or a couple of names of individuals that have made a difference in your life. Maybe it was a relative, a friend, teacher, coach, coworker, someone who believed that in you and what you did really mattered, and that you really mattered. And now when you think of this person, if you have some paper, write down a few of the things that come to mind, a few adjectives that would describe that person. And there's a list. If we were all on the call and we could call out these words now, the list could go for days, but people that are honest, that believe in you, that are probably optimistic and uplifting and truthful, and there's so many words that could describe this individual. Whatever it is that you may have written, the question I have are these qualities, the qualities you focus on in your relationships with other people, with your boss, your hiring manager, your coworkers. Or perhaps an even bigger question, and if I ask the hiring manager that you just met with for the job, or a customer you support, or the person you work with or around, to do this same exercise, and I ask them to write down some names of some individuals who made a difference in their life, would your name be on the list? And if not, what are some things that you can change and do now to build that type of relationship? The second thing I want to talk about is it's not about you. We have to know what it means to win in the eyes of the hiring manager with whom we're interviewing, or within the eyes of our customer. What you see on the screen is an advertisement from years gone by, an ad that Minolta put out, and it goes like this: are you waiting for someone to lead and inspire you? For the boss to recognize you, for clients to thank you, for coworkers to help you, for the world to hail you? Well, here's a newsflash. They're all just sitting there too, waiting for you. Unfortunately, many of us approach conversations assuming the other person is interested in what we have to say. In sales, we sell with the assumption that prospects are asking, who are you, what's your product or service, when are you open, where are you located. In an interview, it's what have we done, what can we accomplish. All of these things come to mind. But the only real question in the hiring authorities or the customer's mind is, why should I care? And I, as a customer, want to know how what you're offering can benefit my life. It's not tell me a story about you. It's tell me a story about me. And this is true also in the interview process. Tell me how you can save my time, increase my income, reduce my stress, make me smarter, bring more love to my life, cause people to think highly of me, help me do it myself, get it to me fast, make it unique to me, entertain me, respect my time, connect it to a cause I believe in, and be honest. Let's look at this another way. Let's say you work in a hardware store and I come in to buy a drill. What do I need? Now, many would say that I need a drill, but actually I need a hole. And until you understand what type of hole I need, you can't sell me the drill. I may need a sledgehammer for all you know. We've got to change our point of reference, and this is going to affect everything that we do. It'll affect the way we write a resume, the way we put a proposal together, the way we solve problems, the way we report. It'll affect our conversations overall. I want to talk briefly, though, about several areas: presentations, activity, the communication channel, and timeline, and how it will affect these things. Let's start with the presentation. Whatever you may be presenting, you've got to understand from the person to whom you're presenting the format he or she prefers. I recommend sending an agenda of the meeting ahead of time so that the person knows what's going to be covered. You've got to know, do they prefer email or hard copy, paper or plastic, hard shell or soft? Understand what's important to them, and whatever that is, make sure it is covered first in the presentation. This goes for the interview process as well as a sales presentation or any type of communication. Even if you spent hours on end creating these wonderful 25, 30 pages in a presentation, and you find out there's only 3 that are most important to that person, those are the only 3 you'll cover. From an activity standpoint, what does the person expect out of the engagement? I mentioned at Greene Resources, we're a recruiting solutions firm, and we pride ourselves on a less than 3-to-1 submittal to hire ratio. But if a client is not going to make a decision until they see 25 candidates, we either have some negotiating to do on our end, or we need to change our process for that particular person. From a communication channel standpoint, there are numerous ways to communicate: in person, over the phone, via email, via video. What's the person's preference? There are people you can phone for a lifetime and get no response. Send a text message, and there's a reply within minutes. Know what your customers or your hiring authority prefers. And from a timeline standpoint, you want to be as specific as you possibly can. If something is due, ask for a deadline. 99% of the time, the deadline you receive is further out than the one you'll set on yourself. Now, I'm still learning this the hard way. I've always taken the FedEx approach to absolutely positively getting it done and over to them overnight. But why risk setting an expectation that cannot always be met? When deadlines are set, it's by what time, not by what day. If we open up the lines and I say I'll get it to you by Friday, some of you on the call, that'll mean by Thursday night. Some others of you on the call, it'll be by Friday morning. Some others on the call by Friday at 5 p.m. or Friday at midnight. Words like tomorrow mean the morning to me. It could mean midnight to you. So that gets as specific as we possibly can. Let me give you an example as it relates to the interview process. Some of you are looking for that next position. And you certainly have to prepare to answer questions that are going to be asked of you of the hiring authority. But how much time are you spending preparing your questions for the hiring authority? Remember, what I'm saying here, it's not about you, but about the other person. And this is so true even in the interview. You will stand out and become unforgettable if you engage the hiring authority in a discussion around what makes a difference to them. For example, here's some questions that could be asked in that interview process to the hiring authority. What are your top 3 goals this year? How about your department's or your company's goals? What are the things this person can do in the position to help you, your department, and company reach those goals? What does a successful first week look like for this person? How about the first 30 days, 90 days? What's your biggest concern about someone in this role? Engaging in a conversation, did you get to know more about that person and that company, is going to help you become more unforgettable. Now let's say I had a sales call in which I was calling on several of you that are on this call or had signed up for this call. And let's take several of you. Let's take Lloyd Harrison, class of 2000, Nicholas DeCalandria, class of 2004, Jed Heisong, class of 1995, and Joel Prince, class of 2000. Now you're all together in a company, and I'm making a call to each of you. And after researching each of you, not only do I want to make my presentation unique to the company, but I want to make it unique to each of you. Now, I have not met these individuals. This is research, and it does not take much time at all, using LinkedIn, Facebook, quick Google searches, or websites. And there's information you can gather to make sure your presentation to that person is unique to them. For example, Lloyd Harrison, class of 2000. Many of you may remember played football for NC State, went on to an NFL career with the Redskins, Chargers, Dolphins. For Lloyd, I'm going to need to emphasize the athletic careers of our team members, because for him, that's going to mean more than it would be to others. To Lloyd, it's going to speak to the person's hustle, their drive, their determination, their team focus, their winning mentality. And it's critical that I do that in this presentation of my team so that he has a better connection with us and we become more unforgettable. But on this same call, I've got Nicholas sitting there, class of 2004, and with Nicholas I would emphasize the greater good, our involvement with nonprofits and in the community, the programs we have put together specifically for nonprofits because of his passion for supporting nonprofits, including he helped start the Young Nonprofit Professionals Network. In fact, if I can get one of those nonprofits in which he's involved to refer me to him, even better. Now in this same group of individuals, we have Jed, class of 1995, a CPA, CGMA. He graduated #1 in the College of Management. Has served as a treasurer of a foundation, chair of an audit committee. For Jed, I need to be absolutely perfect with anything that I turn into him. I'm going to be judged negatively if my information isn't spot on. Jed's going to find things no others in the group would even notice, and I need to be aware of that in my communication and in my dealings with Jed. Submitting resumes of candidates, possibly, if I'm submitting them to Jed, I'm going to emphasize more their education, their certifications, their ongoing learning, because Jed's going to relate to that possibly more than others in the group. And then Joel, class of 2000. Joel is described as an expert relationship builder. With Joel, it's going to be important that I have numerous referrals. More than one person telling Joel that I am a person he should know. That's going to make all the difference in the world. If I go in without that, it's going to be hard for me to build that unforgettable relationship with Joel. So that's just an example of how you personalize your presentations to each person, not only the company or the hiring authority with whom you're interviewing, but each person in that room with whom you interact. Now at Greene, we also customize each of our proposals. You can also do this with resumes and other things. We use a tool called CoverBind, and it allows us to customize covers for each customer so that cover itself is personalized with that person's name, company logo. But it's not a spiral binding. This is a library-bound presentation that we can give still customized on the cover for that particular person, and it makes a difference. I want to talk a little bit about being engaged, being there in the moment. There was a study done on why business is lost. And what the study found is that 4% of the customers moved or closed, 5% because of a new business friend, 9% on price, 14% dissatisfied with the service, but 68% of the businesses left because of indifference by the supplier. I would say this is true also for candidates in their interview process. The supplier or the candidate didn't show they cared. And the same is true for prospecting. And researching you, I know a number of you are in a sales type of position, and so I wanted to share with you a little bit about salespeople. When it comes to prospecting, 48% of salespeople quit after the first call. And you know this might be true for candidates seeking a position as well. 20% quit after the second, 7% after the third, 5% after the fourth, 4% after the fifth. Yet 80% of customers say yes after the sixth call. And that's after 84% of the salespeople quit. I heard it once said, you can fake sincerity, but you can't fake being there. And we've got to find ways to continue to be there in front of the hiring authority in front of the customers, in front of the coworkers, whomever you're dealing with. Being there and being engaged is perhaps the most difficult thing to do, to be there in the moment with the person or persons with whom you're interacting. The customer doesn't care how many hours you've worked already, how late you were up the night before, how bad of a situation you just had to handle before meeting them or getting on the phone with them. They're interacting with you for the first time. And you've got to be there for each and every one of them. There's a saying that goes, to the world you may be only one person, but to one person you may be the world. And it's your eye contact. It's your questions. It's showing you care more about the other person's success than you do your own. But most importantly, it's the follow-up and the follow-through and the simple act of writing a thank you note. Yes, I am talking about a handwritten thank you note.
Gary?
Yes.
Would you mind going back to that slide, the previous slide, real quick? I wanted to make a point about that. This actually stood out to me from a networking perspective, too, in terms of that being dedicated and the follow-up, because I think a lot of times when people are trying to make connections within a company, it doesn't work with the first contact and they give up. So they need they need to be those salespeople that keep going. I'm not saying email the same person 6 times, but if it's not working with one person, let's go try another, right? I think we're too quick to be that 48% that drop out after the first contact, and this is a process that takes time to get to that person who wants to get to know you and give you the opportunity to be unforgettable.
Catherine, that's a great point. I have a quick story around that, particularly with networking events, and you'll hear me talk more about how you make these things very unique and personable to that individual. And we'll show the slide in a few minutes. So if you want to become more spontaneous individual, specific and unique in your delivery. And we had a sales manager that we placed with a large telecom equipment company. And then he attended a speaking engagement of mine, and I did not know he was going to be there, but the networking was taking place, and I was networking through the room. And before the event, I noticed him, and I went over and introduced myself, and I asked him how his new career was going. And he responded, it's like my mouth is to a fire hose right now with everything going on, but I just love it. I mean, that's what he said. My mouth is to a fire hose, but I just love it. And what Catherine is talking about when it comes to networking, how do you follow up on these and keep in touch? And there are unique ways that you can find to do that. What I do is I always keep note cards in my pocket. I learned this from Faith Popcorn. She's a best-selling author on organization, and she shared in one of her books the idea of always having note cards and simply having note cards with you at all times. Once I turned in my discussion with him, I pulled out a card and I wrote down his name, and I wrote down his name and I wrote fire hose. That's all I needed to remember how I was going to follow up with him. And when you're at networking events, you would have one card for each person with whom you've interacted, so that once you complete that task, you can throw that card away and go to the next one. It's at least the approach that I did. So I wrote that down. And later that afternoon, I got back to the office. I pulled out a note, and a handwritten note was in the mail to him. And at the top of that note, I had glued a picture I had found on the internet of a child with his mouth to a garden hose, and water was spraying out of both sides of the mouth. And my note was very simple. It said, "What a pleasure it was to see you this morning. Your excitement about your new role was contagious. Here's to the fire hose, diminishing to a garden hose soon. Best of success, Gary." There are ways with people you're interacting with networking events that you can follow up and it be very unique. And I'll share some more examples in a few minutes. Going back to this art of writing a note, and I apologize, Catherine, I have clicked on the wrong button. So I'll let someone come in here and set this back up while I share with you the story of writing a thank you note. We have to create an addiction to writing notes. There's a wonderful article on the art of writing notes, and it was written by Cecilia Grimes, and she has a company called Etiquette Matters. And she talks about tilting the note toward the recipient. Instead of saying, "I want to thank you," you want to start your note with you or your. As an example, I believe Robert Hart may or may not be on the call. He signed up. He is a class of 1973. That's fantastic, Robert. And I know in researching you online, he's our one low handicapper on the call today. If I were writing a note, and let's say that Robert and he took me to his golf course to play, and I'm following up with a note. Instead of thank you for allowing me to play with you on your course, it would be your course was outstanding. So you start with you or your. Then you include details, illustrations, examples. And Catherine, I'm going to pause again here. I'll need some help getting the presentation back online if you have a minute. So then you go into including details, illustrations, and examples. So I will continue this note. Your course was outstanding. You know that shot you played on number 5, I will not forget. Thank you for the opportunity and the experience to play with you at your course. So you just invert a thank you note from being in your person to the other's person. Other things that you need to remember to do. Have notes of all kinds readily available. Always include the honorific on the envelope. So it needs to be, if it's a reverend, the reverend. I just clicked on the wrong. The honorable for an elected official. If they're under 18 and it's a female under 18, the MISS. Over 18, just an MS period. Master for 10 and under boy. I mean, the list goes on and on, but the Mr. or Miss, you want to use that. You want to use interesting stamps. Make sure that your thank you note has crisp margins. On the first line is the date. You want to use a conversational tone. I'll click on something there. Use appreciate, grateful. Instead of thank you, everybody uses the word thank you. Use appreciate, grateful. Replace nice, good, great with words, or wonderful even, with words like delightful, stimulating, captivating, inspired. You need to have a process also for keeping in touch, whether it's a client or a prospect. In the book Gung Ho, Ken Blanchard, Sheldon Bowles describes a congratulatory continuum and how the more to the right you are on the continuum, the more effective you are. I'm going to catch up our slides here. And in this, I'm going to change the word from a congratulatory continuum to an engagement continuum. And the more you can engage with your customers or the hiring authority or your coworkers on the right side of the continuum, the more unforgettable you become. In other words, the more you can move from a programmed response to a spontaneous response, the more you can move from blanketed to individual, from general to specific, from traditional to unique, the more unforgettable you become. And the only way to do this is what I did in preparation for the call today, is to take the time to get to know your audience, your coworkers, your customers, the hiring authority. Get to know their interests, their goals, their aspirations. Let's say I have the opportunity to work with Rebecca Dunstan, class of 2011. It helps to know that she coached high school lacrosse and was Outstanding Panhellenic Woman of the Year in 2010. It helps to know that Gary Hoke, class of 1996, invented the cubicle shield. Congratulations, Gary. I need one. And his pages and pages of endorsements. It helps to know that Laura Mansfield, class of 2001, is active and outdoors. Knowing these things can help me create a follow-up that is more spontaneous, individual, specific, and unique to each of them. I gave you an example of the garden hose. Another person that is a customer of ours is typically difficult to get a smile out of this person. If there's a way to look at something negatively, she's going to do it. And so I went out to find something unique for her. And it's a book. And the book is called 50 Jobs Worse Than Yours. And I took it to her. Now, I'm not saying for you to do everything that I'm explaining today as examples. You've got to do things that are comfortable to you. But I felt that this would make a difference for her. And yes, indeed, it got a smile. But the reason is, I think on page 37 in the book, she found my my industry and said, look, your industry is in the book, but find a way to find things that are unique. The most extreme example I have of this is a hiring authority I was calling on. Again, you could, this could be an interview process as well, but this is perhaps a little bit extreme for the interview process, but not if you're in sales. And as I'm on the phone with this hiring authority, she went off of me on the phone. I said, I'm sorry if I said something to upset you. And she said, no, my computer's acting up, and I talked back to my computer. I also found out on the phone that the way she chose the vendors she would work with is she had a bulletin board with all the business cards up on the bulletin board. And we hung up the phone. I did not get the meeting. But I called her back about an hour later, and I said, I have a gift to bring you. She didn't have time. I said, but you have to go home at some point. Let me meet you in the lobby, which we did. She comes to the lobby, and I'm standing there with two packages. She opens the first large package and pulls out two giant ears. True story. I said, if you'll just take these ears and hang them on both sides of your monitor, next time you'll talk to your computer, it'll actually listen. And obviously she's looking at me like I'm crazy. And I said, but I have more. And I handed her a large envelope. And we opened the envelope, and I pulled out an 11 by 17 copy of my business card. And I said, if you don't mind putting this up on your bulletin board, I'd greatly appreciate it. She said, Gary, this is not going on my bulletin board. I said, I figured as much. So I reached into the envelope, and I pulled out an 8.5 by 11 copy of my business card. And I said, will you put this on your bulletin board? She said, it's not going to happen. I said, that's fine. In the envelope, there are 25 copies of my business card. If you wouldn't mind just wallpapering that bulletin board with my card, I'd appreciate it. And I left. I never made a sales presentation, never talked about the company and what we did, except she knew what we did just from the introduction, but we never talked in detail about it. Our first order came from her the next day. The next day. Because it is very true when it comes to being engaged with other people, people will forget about what you said. People forget about what you did. People will never forget about how you made them feel. The last thing I want to talk about is creating the standout experience. The average American, believe it or not, watches over 6 hours of television a day, every day, because they're bored and they want more fun in their lives. In a recent survey, 70.9% of people polled would switch vendors if the new company was more fun to do business with. I was going, not that I go through fast food restaurants often, but I was here locally going down Six Forks Road, and there's a Wendy's restaurant. And as I pulled through the drive-thru, the person on the speaker was ecstatic, exuberant. I've never heard someone so excited and taking an order. And as I pull around the corner to get my order, she's literally hanging out the window with food and drink in hand and smiling from ear to ear. And as I'm driving away from Wendy's, as she hands me my order, she looks at me, she goes, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Now, I wasn't planning on going to Wendy's tomorrow, but she's expecting to see me tomorrow. It's the little phrases that you can use that can make all the difference and allow you to become unforgettable. Even when problems arise, the determining factor becomes how we take care of those problems, so that the difference we made in addressing the problem becomes so much more memorable than the problem itself. Let me repeat. The determining factor becomes how we take care of those problems, so that the difference we made in addressing the problems becomes so much more memorable than the problem itself. For example, in our industry, we utilize so many tools and resources, but one of those is the use of job boards. There are two well-known job boards, Monster and Career Builder, both of which were competing for my business. Their situation is they really wanted the business, and the traditional approach would be to pick up the phone, continue to call me until they get a signed contract, which they both did that. Now, they were both desperate, I guess, to get this business closed. It was the end of the month, and they did everything wrong. They talked about the end of the month bargains, about getting food. Literally, I need to put food on my child's table. Everything that could have gone wrong in trying to close the deal by the end of the month. And I made it clear to both of them, there's no way I'm signing a contract. I'm going to be working late as it is. I'm not going to have time even for dinner. And I will look at these contracts tomorrow. It was, in fact, the last day of the month, and they were both, as I said, trying desperately to get the business. I explained to both of them my situation, but one of them still found a way to be different. 10 minutes after hanging up with both of them, I received an email from Career Builder. And it said, "I'm sorry for pushing the contract today, especially if you're already working through dinner. Please know that I've ordered you a pizza, and it will be at your door in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my office door, and there was a pizza. I pulled out that Career Builder contract. I signed that contract, and I got it in for their month-end deadline. And for what? A $10 pizza. Now, this presentation is not for you to judge my decision-making, nature of making decisions, but it is a chance for you to see, even in the worst of situations, how you can turn it around and make it positive and make it unforgettable. We've talked about 4 things. The battleground is on the customer experience. It's not about you. It's about being engaged. It's about generating the standout experience. In closing, I'm reminded of a wonderful children's story written by John Muth, who combined his studies of Zen with his love of Leo Tolstoy to write the 3 questions. And the story tells of a young boy, Nikolai, who wants to be a good person but is unsure what to do. He has 3 questions. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? And what is the right thing to do? He takes these questions to his friends, Sonia the heron, Gogol the monkey, and Pushkin the dog. As you can imagine, his friends have comical answers, and Nikolai, not feeling right about those answers, decides to visit what every great children's book should have, and that's Leo, the wise turtle who lives high up in the mountain. And when he got to Leo, he found him digging in his garden, and he asked his questions, but since the turtle was old and digging was hard, Nikolai completed the garden for Leo. And when he finished, a storm arose, and he got Leo into safety. And then Nikolai heard her cry for help in the woods, and he ran out, and he found a panda, and he found an injured panda and her child, and carried them both into safety. The next morning, the sun was out. Nikolai's friends had arrived to see if everyone was safe. All was well and good. But still, he had not had his questions answered. And so he turned to Leo to ask his questions again. And Leo says, "But your questions have already been answered." "They have?" asked the boy. And this is where I will read from the book. And again, the 3 questions: who is the most important one? What is the right thing to do? And what is the most important time? And Leo's response was this: "Yesterday, if you had not stayed to help me dig my garden, you wouldn't have heard the panda's cries for help in the storm. Therefore, the most important time was the time you spent digging the garden. The most important one at the moment was me, and the most important thing to do was to help me with my garden. Later, when you found the injured panda, the most important time was the time you spent mending her leg and saving her child. The most important ones were the panda and her baby, and the most important thing to do was to take care of them and make them safe. Remember then that there is only one important time, and that time is now. The most important one is always the one you were with, and the most important thing is to do good for the one who is standing at your side. For these, my dear boy, are the answers to what is most important in this world. This is why we are here. And this is why each of you are here, and your time is now." Catherine, I'll be glad to take some
Gary,
questions.
And like I said in the beginning, if you want to text your questions in the chat box on the bottom left, you can do that. Or if you want to raise your hand, we can give you the microphone and you can ask it live. Gary, I just wanted to thank you again and say one thing that really stood out to me was the point about what people remember is how you make them feel. And I think this is something that people understand but don't quite understand how to leave people feeling good, right? And I think one of the easiest things you can do is to be there with the person and to listen to what they have to say and make them feel important and make them feel like an expert. If you're on the call and you have been in my office, then you probably heard this, but we talk about informational interviewing and making connections with people, and that 30 minutes, if you can get somebody on the phone or meet them for coffee and just ask them about what they do and what they like about their job and what a typical day is like. I mean, how often do we have somebody who just wants to talk about us for 30 minutes? Right? And if you do that and you listen and you ask good questions, you're going to leave that person feeling good about you and about themselves, and that's going to be a relationship that makes you unforgettable. So that was a key point that stood out to me.
Along those lines, Catherine, what's most difficult what the example you're giving is finding a way to maintain focus and to stay focused on that person. And especially in the office and you're on the phone, there's so many other distractions. In fact, a to-do list has never worked for me, so I created a stop doing list. So anything I should not be doing is, there was a wonderful phrase once, just imagine there are legions of people trying to be successful doing the very work that successful people throw out. And finding a way to really focus on the work at hand is all the difference that can be made, particularly when you are talking to another person. You've got to focus 100% on them and then move on to the next conversation. But it is difficult to do, but you've got to maintain that and make sure you're not thinking about the next thing that's at hand, but focus 100% on that person that's in front
Gary,
of
it
you.
looks like we have a question from Richard. So Richard, I'm going to unclick the talk button, and at that point, if you want to click on the talk button, top left here, you can ask your question out loud.
Okay. So Gary, I guess a quick question is, it's kind of some of the interesting stories you've shared in terms of the mouse's ears for the monitor and the large business, oversized business cards, et cetera. Have you ever had anything along those lines kind of backfire on you?
Particular about how I do it. A lot of research goes in to it. So from that perspective, I have not, but I have, in the research being done, had that backfire on me, and I may have even had it done on the call today. I had the luxury of no one being able to tell me whether I was right or wrong and how I talked about people. But there was a person whose website showed that they focus exclusively on downtown Raleigh. So my presentation to them was going to be about everything that we do downtown. And unfortunately, I'd gone to the wrong website and they had no focus on downtown. So what I should have done is a little bit more research to validate my findings. And so that is an example where I went in talking to them about downtown when that was not their area of focus. And I had to, and in that situation, I just messed up. My research, I've gone down the wrong path, which then led me to asking them very specific questions to get to know them better. So that is one example. I was able to turn it around quickly by asking a lot of questions about them and getting to know them, and then getting beyond the negative experience of doing the wrong research.
Okay, any more questions? We're happy to take them.
Hey, Catherine, one other thing along those lines, because if this was open to everyone, a concern would be to do maybe something that's too hokey for me to do. And so I just gave a few maybe hokey examples, but the whole point is making it personalized to them. So if you'll think back to if they're an athlete, being able to connect with that. If they are involved in the community, if there's a certain nonprofit that's important to them, if they were an English major, or there was a certain school they went to, or certain interests that they have, anything that you can connect to. And then even if there's a certain author that they like and send them a book to that, you can find ways not to be hokey and still make those connections. We hired a person that came in and with a combination lock. It was for a sales position, and this may be on the hokey side, but the letter that she put together was perfect, and she ended it with her name and our company as the perfect combination. So it could have been hokey if that's all she had done, but the letter was very specific to how she could make a difference to our organization. And it certainly got her the interview over and above the 50 other resumes that were sitting on my desk.
Sometimes if you're talking about follow-up and people wonder, okay, how do I stay connected with people from a networking perspective? So similar theme, different situation. Sometimes it's following back up with that person to let them know kind of how you've processed that conversation and what you found most helpful and what you've done with that information. can be a really nice way to reignite the conversation or just keep you top of mind, and let them, again, make them feel important and make them feel good about the time that they spent with you.
If you're meeting with the CEO, complimenting other people in the organization with whom you've dealt with can go a long way. Talking about things you've learned about the operation and the corporation. But complimenting others, depending on who you're talking to, giving them leads that they can follow up on, or following up with information relevant to them. Another candidate that we ended up hiring following the interview saw how focused we are on certain things in the office. One is a Kermit Award. And so after the interview, she actually turned in a Kermit Award. A Kermit Award is if you wow someone. It's now easy being Greene because of you. And this is the first time we had a candidate leave and said, I noticed all the Kermits. I would like to nominate the person that interviewed her for a Kermit Award and explain specifically why she should get that award. We ended up hiring that person later, and she definitely stood out because she really listened to what made a difference for us in the organization. So it's little
okay, well,
things that
thank
can be
you
done.
guys. We're about 5 minutes till 1, and if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and end the session. We'll send everyone a recording, including those that signed up and weren't able to make it. So we hope you enjoyed the session. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you again to Gary for your time and sharing your expertise.
Thank you. Have a great day.